laser, like, where, to the point where we couldn't even do it, let alone being done out, in some weird remote place.
I know. I only allow myself to think about these things for a limited amount of time because it is really, some of the science fiction is very real and some of the science fiction is very scary. I wish it wasn't, any of it was true. I really wish that was the case. But the more I do research, the more I talk to people who are in positions to know more than I do, the more I realize that many of these awful things really are happening. We all know that the Nazis used slave labor during World War II in Germany. According to people like William Tompkin, and there's other ones too, but they've talked about people have been abducted to be labor down in the caverns of Antarctica to help in building things like ships that can go out, not ships, but sky ships that can go out beyond the moon. And there's other things that indicate that people that have particular knowledge are abducted so that their brains can be used or their knowledge can be used. And one of the things that makes me think that, well, gee, that could be true is because we've had reports of, let's say, many, many scientists who just disappeared. And when you begin to put those stories together and lace the pieces together, you begin to see a picture that you might not really like to know.
And that's the scary part, and then there's a lot of people that are in denial, Well,
I mean, that's almost logical. It's like self-defense, that if it's beyond what you think you can mentally deal with, then it's easier just to pretend it doesn't exist.
So besides having climate and earth changes going on, we have to worry about being abducted by UFOs and aliens and, maybe being on a plate of dinner somewhere. I mean, it's so many things right now going on all at once.
I'm going to get off of this terrible subject for a little bit and
go
back to the politicians.
Do.
One of the things that Senator John McCain did that, I don't think hardly anybody knows about is that he helped out John Burroughs, who was one of the two men who first was in I'm going to say it wrong, Rendlesham Forest, which is one of the major UFO landing spots. It's a big story, and I'm probably not saying it right. It's Rendlesham Forest in the UK, and he either touched or got so close to the UFO that had landed that he experienced radiation, and it affected him, and he suffered from major health problems. Well, the military/government decided they would deny that he was even on active duty at that time, so they wouldn't have to give him medical care. And Burroughs' attorney and Senator John McCain got together, and they managed to get his military records corrected and released, and he was given full medical disability. I found it kind of interesting that while McCain was getting all the tributes upon his death, that I was just searching for new information about him that might relate to some of the things we cover in a website, and this was the information I came upon.
Well, again, the government has tried covering that up so much, but it's too many witnesses to what happened, saw it. And so, I mean, there's no way they can hush that one. And it's just, I don't know. I think the governments, are thinking of themselves, not thinking of the people. I don't know what's going on.
Well, there's flickers of hope with the way people are reacting to what we've been through in the past year, and maybe there will be enough of us that will get involved like never before. And I think the only way that things are going to change is if there is indeed a blue wave. I think even sensible Republicans should vote Democratic just to clean the slate, and then they can go back to being Republicans. because, it's just, nothing's moving through the Congress or the Senate in any way whatsoever. And I just hope that things begin to change in the midterms.
I hope so. There's so much hate going on right now in the Congress and the Senate. It's scary. They're battling each other. I got a funny feeling you're going to find a different majority here, midterms. I really think some changes are going to.
Many people have.
Yeah. I just want to tip on to one thing. The Republicans, I'm on Social Security. I'm not that age. And they want to start robbing us and, cut our, a monthly, what we get. And then they also want to make it changed Social Security to a nice name to make it sound like you're almost on welfare.
Well, the news, I think today was the day it broke. One of the senators, I think, made it public that large amounts of FEMA money, I cannot quote the amount, it's in the millions, was transferred from FEMA to handle things like the storm that's coming at us right now, transferred it to ICE to handle the unnecessary disaster of the immigration and locking up children and families. So the money's going there, and what will happen now when we have another major storm come in, and what's happened to the funds? Will we just keep going more in debt? I don't know.
Well, what I heard, it was $9.6 million or something of that nature. But
that might be right.
But, they don't have that big a fund anyway. And, on top of it, this is just a tipberg of what's going on right now in the East Coast.
They also, by the way, were taking money from the Coast Guard.
Oh, yeah.
Go to ISIS.
And, just a few years ago, they managed to booster their budget. And now, they got robbed again. We need the Coast Guard. I don't know. It is so strange right now what's going on. I was even reading last night about the submarines, that, there's going to be a shortage of submarines because the Navy wants all nuclear submarines. But for every nuclear submarine they build, they can build 20 diesel, subs that could be out there to compete against, the Russians and the Chinese, the Chinese are really building up their naval force, especially their submarine force. And, I think we need to really sit back and say, hey, maybe you don't need the most fanciest thing, but...
You just need more things that will work.
Yeah. Then, they're one of the aircraft carriers right now that they have decommissioned. They're talking about over $1.5 billion, to scrap it. And it's going up, every day, what it's actually going to cost. It would have been actually cheaper. The time they get done with it, they could have probably have gone through and did a complete refit and everything and got another 20 years out of it rather than scrapping it. It's we always have to have the best. And sometimes the best isn't the best thing.
Isn't necessary.
No, I really don't. I think, our country can't afford it. We can't afford it. The older people, young people, it was just yesterday talking about like the schools, the lunch program. They're going to basically defund that because they feel that, the kids, they did a survey. The kids don't like wholesome food. They're going to let it go back pretty much where, a kid can go, either starve to death or buy a can of Coca-Cola.
Yep, I hear you.
Yeah. And,
when I first got out of college, I taught for a year in the inner city of Detroit, and that food program for those kids was absolutely essential. None of us can function very hard or well on school subjects if all we can hear is the growling of our own stomach. And, to cut back, you just keep dumbing down the population if you don't take care of people or children.
Well, back, and this is going back now 20 years ago, but in Tacoma, when we lived in Tacoma, my wife and my family, we knew a couple families out there, that they worked, but they didn't make enough money really to make ends meet. And, they had to visit like the food banks and stuff like that. If it wasn't for some of the programs, where the kids would go and have breakfast, in the morning and have lunch, the kids would be going to school, honestly, with no food in their stomach at all.
I know. And so anything that reaches out to help our society is being seen as a waste of money, and it's being cut.
Oh, yeah, but then we can also dump a whole bunch of money to create a Space Force when we have an Air Force, which the Air Force was totally capable of doing whatever it needs to be done, and I still can't figure that one out.
I know that there has been a space program that they haven't talked about, that's been focused on things like getting to Mars and getting into deep space and things like that we don't hear hardly anything about. So in a sense, the work of a deep space program is in reality functioning already, but we don't need to set up a separate bureaucracy to spend more money.
No, I think they probably should have just came right out and said, hey, we had this organization and it's been going on for a blank amount of years, and and then fund it the right way rather than fund it where all these trillions of dollars disappear and they don't know where it went.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, they've had many articles in the past about, $1 million toilets and things like that because they hide the spending in strange ways.
Oh, yeah. Well, actually, or they come out and say, we don't know where it's at.
But yeah.
I don't know. If we did it, we'd go to prison really fast. I'll tell you that much.
So have you always been this interested in cutting-edge subjects, or is that something that's come to you later in life?
Well, I started back in 1976 in broadcasting. I don't know if I told you that. And I got hired on at a radio station in Battleground, Washington. And they were top 40. And the day I moved down there, got an apartment, and went in there to, start my shift, the owner of the station came up to me and said, oh, we're not doing top 40 anymore. And I said, oh, my God, I just moved here. I moved my wife, the wife at the time there, and, just got an apartment and all that stuff. And he goes, well, we're now going to be talk radio. Here I was in my early 20s, and I go, okay, well, what is it, politics? No, we want something different. And at that time, there was like witchcraft going on. There was a cult going on in that area. And next thing I knew, I started doing, I guess, paranormal. So it's been pretty much paranormal, pretty much for all these years, off and on.
And so you really owe that to the guy who hired you at that top 40 station, huh? That's very interesting.
Oh, yeah. And, that was even before Art Bell, did it.
Oh, yeah. I think, when is Art Bell? Early 90s, mid-90s?
It started, I think, around 89, 90.
Did it really? Okay.
Yeah, John Lear went into... Now, Art and me weren't great friends, but we were friends, so we would talk several times. He's the one that got me back, because I was retired, back into doing what I'm doing right now. And he was, what his story is, what he told me is John Lear came and talked to him, and Art was really tired of talking about politics. And John Lear told him, he goes, look, get into the paranormal, talk about UFOs, talk about this subject, talk about that. And Art did it, and he loved it, and it made all the difference. It was like somebody flipping a light switch, he told me.
That's interesting. Both your story and his story involved a nudge, unexpected nudge from someone. That's very interesting.
Well, you know what I also have found? I started out a year ago. This is my anniversary month. And, I was out of broadcasting for 10 years before I came back on. And I was scared. It was hard to adapt to it because I've done other things in my life those 10 years. And I couldn't find my way. And, all of a sudden here, about a month and a half ago, something clicked in my mind. I was scared to talk like what I'm talking to you about. I didn't know how people would take it. So